The narrow alleyway in the heart of the city reeked of damp concrete and forgotten rain, the kind of place where shadows clung like old regrets. Karina Holt pressed her back against the graffiti-scarred wall, her breath coming in shallow bursts that echoed off the brick. Her ex, Marcus, loomed too close, his silhouette blocking the faint glow from the street lamp at the alley's mouth. His voice was low, laced with that familiar edge of possession, the one that had once made her feel wanted, but now twisted her stomach into knots. "You think you can just walk away? After everything?" His hand shot out, not quite touching her arm, but close enough to make her flinch. Memories flooding back, nights of arguments that escalated, doors slammed, promises broken like cheap glass. She scanned the alley's end, desperate for an escape, but the city noise seemed distant, muffled by the walls. No one passing by on the bustling sidewalk 30 feet away would hear her if she called out. The hum of traffic and laughter from nearby bars drowned everything. Karina's heart pounded, a terrified rhythm that matched the pulse in her temples. This wasn't the first time he'd found her, but tonight felt different, final, like the weight of unspoken threats had finally tipped into something irreversible. If you've ever felt that chill of isolation in a crowd, stick around. This story's just beginning, and it's the kind that reminds us why we hit subscribe for tales of quiet courage. From the mouth of the alley, the low rumble of a motorcycle engine cut through the din like a siren's call. It wasn't aggressive, just steady, the kind of sound that vibrated through the ground and into Karina's bones. Briggs, Torque Ellison, eased his bike to a stop under the street lamp, his leather jacket creaking as he swung a leg over the seat. At 42, Torque carried the weight of a life etched in scars, faded tattoos from his days in the military, a limp from a roadside blast that still ached on humid nights, and the hollow echo of a promise made to a fallen brother overseas. Watch over the ones left behind, no matter what. He'd kept that vow in small ways, pulling over for stranded travelers on desert highways, but lately, the road had felt lonelier, his iron promise crew scattered by time and regrets. Torque wasn't looking for trouble. He was just cutting through the city after a long ride from the outskirts, the wind still whipping at his salt and pepper beard. But as he killed the engine, the alley's tension hit him like a gust. Karina's wide eyes, the man's aggressive stance, the way her shoulders hunched in defense. He'd seen it before, in war zones and back-alley bars, the prelude to something ugly. Without a word, he stepped forward, boots scraping softly on the pavement, his presence filling the space like a shadow lengthening at dusk. "Hey," Torque said, his voice calm but firm, carrying the gravel of too many miles on the throttle. He didn't raise a fist or shout. Instead, he pulled out his phone, thumb hovering over the screen as he angled it toward the light. "Everything all right here?" Marcus turned, surprise flickering across his face, but Torque kept his eyes on Karina, giving her the space to speak or not. The air thickened, charged with the scent of exhaust lingering from the bike and the faint metallic tang of fear. Marcus straightened, puffing his chest. "Mind your business, old man. This is between me and her." But Torque didn't budge, his frame blocking half the alley's entrance, the chrome of his bike glinting like a silent sentinel. He glanced at Karina again, seeing the tremor in her hands, the way she clutched her bag like a lifeline. "Looks like she's saying otherwise," he replied evenly, hitting record on his phone. The soft beep was barely audible, but it shifted the dynamic, the act of witnessing, of pulling back the curtain on the shadows. Karina's voice broke through, small but steadying. "Please, I just want to go home." It was the crack in the armor that Torque recognized, the plea that echoed his own buried losses, the wife who'd left after his discharge, the kid he barely saw anymore, all tied to that unfulfilled promise of protection. Marcus sneered, stepping closer to her, but Torque raised a hand, palm out, non-threatening. "Walk away, friend, or we call it in together. Cops, witnesses, your choice." The word witnesses hung in the air, pulling eyes from the street. A couple paused on the sidewalk, phones emerging, murmurs rippling like waves. For a heartbeat, the alley held its breath, the distant wail of a siren underscoring the standoff. Marcus's face twisted, calculating. Then he backed off a step, muttering curses under his breath. "This ain't over!" He spat at Karina before shoving past Torque, shoulder-checking him lightly as he stormed toward the street. Torque didn't retaliate, just watched him go, the phone still recording until the man vanished into the crowd. Karina exhaled, sliding down the wall a fraction, her knees weak. "Thank you," she whispered, eyes meeting his, gratitude mixed with wariness, the kind born from too many close calls. Torque pocketed his phone and offered a nod, the lines around his eyes softening. "No thanks needed. You got someone to call? Family? Friends?" She shook her head, and in that moment, something unspoken passed between them, a thread of understanding, fragile but real. He'd stepped in on instinct, but now it felt like more, like the universe tugging at that old promise, reminding him that honor wasn't just words on a patch. As he helped her to her feet, the city's pulse resumed around them, horns blaring, laughter spilling from doors, but the alley felt changed, lighter. Torque walked her to the street, his bike waiting like a faithful steed, unaware that this single act would ripple outward, drawing his scattered crew back together, challenging the shadows of corruption that hid in plain sight. For Karina, it was the first crack in a wall of silence. For Torque, it was the spark of redemption, a quiet vow renewed under the neon glow. Little did they know, the city was about to hear every echo. The night air cooled as they emerged onto the sidewalk, the crowd parting slightly, whispers following. Torque's mind raced back to the desert sands, the brotherhood forged in fire, and how one biker's code could upend a life of quiet evasion. He glanced at Karina, seeing not just a woman in peril, but a mirror to his own unresolved debts. "If you need backup," he said, handing her a worn card from his pocket, simple, etched with the iron promise emblem. "Call. We ride for promises like that." She took it, fingers brushing his calloused ones, and for the first time that night a small smile ghosted her lips. The encounter lingered in the air like exhaust fumes, promising storms ahead, but also the unyielding strength of those who chose to stand. As Torque fired up his engine, the roar was a declaration, subtle yet profound, that some interventions weren't endings but beginnings, ones that would bind fates in ways neither could foresee. The city lights blurred into streaks as Torque guided his bike through the late-night traffic, the engine's steady thrum a counterpoint to the chaos in his mind. Karina's face lingered in his rearview mirror long after he'd waved her toward a waiting cab, her silhouette shrinking against the neon haze. He could still feel the weight of her hand on the card he'd given her, the faint tremor that spoke of battles fought in silence. Torque had seen enough in his 42 years to know that one intervention rarely ended the story. It just peeled back the first layer of a deeper wound. The air whipped cool against his face, carrying the faint scent of rain on asphalt, but it did little to wash away the unease settling in his gut like bad coffee. Back at his workshop on the city's edge, a squat brick building ringed by chain link and overgrown weeds, Torque killed the engine and leaned the bike against its stand. The place was more sanctuary than garage, walls lined with tools worn smooth by years of honest work and shelves cluttered with mementos from the road, a faded iron promise patch from his army days, a dog-eared photo of his crew under a desert sun, all grinning like they owned the world. He flicked on the overhead light, the bulb humming to life with a soft buzz, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts. Pouring himself a black coffee from the pot that never cooled, he sank onto a stool, replaying the alley in his head. Marcus's sneer, Karina's quiet plea, it all tugged at that old promise to his fallen brother Jax, who'd pulled him from the rubble overseas with his last breath. "Keep the light on for the lost ones, Torque." We're all we've got." He pulled out his phone, the recording from the alley staring back at him. It wasn't much, just shadows and voices, but enough to capture the threat in Marcus's tone, the fear in hers. Torque wasn't one for playing hero. His limp reminded him daily of the cost of charging in blind, but ignoring it felt like betraying Jax all over again, like letting the darkness win one more round. He hesitated, thumb hovering over the send button, then forwarded the clip to his old contact at the precinct. A grizzled sergeant named Hale, who'd ridden with the Iron Promise before the badge pulled him inside. "Check this out," he texted. "Might need eyes on it. No more, no less." Torque wasn't accusing. He was just shining a light, the kind that exposed cracks in the system's facade. The workshop door creaked open hours later, just as dawn's first grey light filtered through the grimy windows. In walked Lena Spark Rivera, Torque's right hand in the crew, her boots thudding softly on the concrete floor. At 38, she was all sharp edges and quiet fire, tattoos snaking up her arms from her own stint as a combat medic, eyes that missed nothing. She'd patched him up more times than he could count, from bar fights to the deeper scars of loss. "Heard you had a night," she said, sliding a thermos of fresh brew across the workbench. Her voice was low, laced with the concern of someone who'd buried too many friends. Spark had her own ghosts. A sister lost to the streets years back, a vow to never look away from the vulnerable again. Torque nodded, rubbing the stubble on his jaw. Alley scrape. Woman cornered by her ex. Stepped in, recorded it. Thought it was done. He handed her the phone, and she watched the clip, her expression hardening like cooling steel. The workshop filled with the aroma of coffee and motor oil, a familiar comfort amid the tension. Outside, the city stirred, trucks rumbling past, birds calling in the sparse trees. But inside, the air grew thick with unspoken questions. Spark set the phone down, crossing her arms. "Done? In this town, you know how these things fester, especially if he's got connections." She paused, glancing at the Iron Promise emblem on the wall, a reminder of the brotherhood they'd built from the ashes of war. "Crews scattering talk, but if this pulls us back, we ride as one." He knew she was right. The Iron Promise wasn't just a club, it was a pact, forged in the sands where promises meant survival. Lately, though, life had frayed the edges, jobs drying up, old wounds reopening, members drifting to quieter lives. Torque had pulled back himself, burying the call of the road under routine repairs and solitary rides. But Karina's eyes, wide with that mix of relief and doubt, had stirred something dormant, a sense that honor demanded more than silence. "What if it's bigger?" he mused, staring at the coffee steam curling like desert mirages. Saw the way he moved, like he owned the shadows, and the looks from the street. Folks watching, but not stepping up. Spark leaned against the workbench, the metal creaking under her weight. "Then we dig, quietly. No guns, no glory, just truth." Her words echoed the creed they'd lived by, justice through loyalty, not vengeance. She pulled out her own phone, scrolling through contacts. "I'll reach out to Reyes. He's still got ears in the departments. If this guy's got a pattern." She trailed off as a knock echoed from the front gate, sharp, insistent. Torque rose, his limp more pronounced in the morning chill, and peered through the peephole. There, shifting on the sidewalk, stood Karina, her coat clutched tight against the breeze, eyes scanning the street like she expected ghosts. He opened the gate, the chain rattling softly. "Didn't expect to see you so soon." Up close in the daylight, the strain showed clearer, faint shadows under her eyes, the way she held herself like a coiled spring. Karina met his gaze, the card crumpled in her fist. I couldn't go home. He knows where I work, where I shop. That recording, you said witnesses." Her voice cracked, but she straightened, drawing on some inner reserve. The street behind her bustled with early commuters, but the workshop felt like a bubble, insulated by the hum of the city waking. Torque stepped aside, gesturing her in. Spark offered a nod of solidarity. No questions asked, as Karina sat on an old crate, recounting the years of control, the subtle isolations, the threats veiled as concern. The pieces began to form. Marcus wasn't just an ex, he was a shadow woven into the city's underbelly, whispers of ties to local enforcers who'd bent rules for the right price. Torque listened, the weight of Jax's promise settling heavier. This wasn't random. It was a thread in a larger tapestry of corruption, where silence protected the powerful and crushed the quiet. By mid-morning, the workshop buzzed with purpose. Spark coordinated calls to the crew, veterans like Old Man Greer, the mechanic with a bum knee, and young Jax's namesake, a prospect eager to prove his mettle. No grand rally, just a network activating, phones lighting up with offers of safe houses and alibis. Karina watched, awe softening her features, as Torque sketched a loose plan on a grease-stained notepad. Gather statements, loop inhale without tipping hands, expose the pattern before it swallowed her whole. "We don't fight dirty," he said, his voice steady as the engine he'd just tuned. "We stand firm. That's the promise." As the sun climbed, casting golden shafts through the windows, the air shifted from stale to charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. Karina's hand steadied on the crate, a flicker of trust igniting. Torque felt it too, the pull of redemption, the quiet power of chosen kin rallying not for glory, but for the light. But outside, unseen eyes watched. Marcus's network stirring, a corrupt thread tightening. The city, with its endless roar, was listening now, and the echoes were just beginning to build. And now I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The workshop's air hung heavy with the tang of fresh oil and simmering resolve, the kind that built slowly, like pressure in a sealed engine. Torque leaned against the workbench, his calloused fingers tracing the edge of the notepad where he jotted fragments of Karina's story, names half-remembered, places that felt too familiar, patterns of control that mirrored the subtle manipulations he'd witnessed in war-torn outposts. Karina sat across from him, her posture easing inch by inch as Spark handed her a mug of coffee, steam rising like a veil between her and the morning light. The liquid warmed her hands, a small anchor in the storm of recounting years she'd buried under layers of denial. "He started small," she said, voice threading through the quiet hum of a distant radio playing old rock tunes. Texts at odd hours, showing up at my shifts unannounced. Then it was the questions, who I was with, why I was late. I thought it was love, until it felt like chains. Spark listened without interruption, her eyes sharp as she noted details in her own mental ledger. She'd seen this before, in the eyes of soldiers fresh from the front, carrying invisible weights that bent them double. The Iron Promise crew had always been a haven for the scarred, veterans piecing together lives after the blasts and betrayals. But today, it felt like the walls themselves were leaning in, protective. Outside, the city throbbed with midday rhythm. Delivery trucks idling, pedestrians chattering on sidewalks cracked by time, oblivious to the quiet revolution brewing in the squat brick building. Torque's limp echoed softly as he paced, the old injury a rhythmic reminder of costs paid and promises kept. Jax's words echoed in his mind, a ghost in the gears, keep the light on for the lost ones. This wasn't just about Karina anymore. It was about shining that light into corners the powerful preferred dark. By noon, the first threads of the crew began to weave back together. Old Man Greer arrived first, his pickup rattling to a stop at the gate, the bed loaded with toolboxes and a cooler of sandwiches he'd thrown together from his diner shift. At 65, Greer was the crew's quiet backbone. His hands steady from decades fixing rigs in the desert heat, his own vow born from losing a son to the street's undercurrent. "Heard the call?" he grunted, clapping Torque on the shoulder with a grip like weathered leather. "What's the play?" No fanfare, just the unspoken bond that pulled them from scattered lives. Greer's grease-stained apron still tied. Sparks' medic kit slung over her shoulder like an old friend. Karina watched them, a flicker of wonder crossing her face as they settled around the workbench, the space transforming from solitary refuge to command post. Torque laid it out plainly, his voice low and measured, the gravel of road-worn honesty. "Marcus ain't alone. Karina's story lines up with whispers I've caught. Local spots where folks go quiet after crossing the wrong line. Ties to those security firms that guard the elite, the ones that look away from their own shadows." He didn't name the corruption outright, but the implication hung like exhaust in still air. A web of influence, where badges bent and favors flowed like cheap whiskey. Spark nodded, pulling up a worn map on her tablet, marking spots Karina mentioned, bars with backroom deals, apartments where complaints vanished. "We start with eyes, not fists," she said, her tone cutting through the tension. "Talk to the overlooked. Waitresses, cabbies, the ones who see without being seen." Greer's bushy brows furrowed as he unwrapped a sandwich, the scent of roast beef mingling with the workshop's metallic bite. "Reminds me of a low 9 down south. Crew pulled a girl from a similar mess, ex with cop pals covering tracks. We didn't storm, we documented, turned the light on, and the rats scattered." His words carried the weight of memory, eyes distant for a beat, then refocusing on Karina. "You ain't alone now, miss. That's the promise." She nodded, the mug trembling slightly in her grip, gratitude blooming amid the fear. For the first time, the alley's isolation felt distant, replaced by this makeshift family, flawed, forged in fire, but unyielding. As the afternoon wore on, the crew expanded like ripples on a pond. Jax's namesake, a lanky 24-year-old with fresh ink and a fire in his eyes, rolled up on his customized cruiser, the engine's purr announcing him before the gate clanged open. He joined the iron promise to honor his uncle's legacy, the one who'd taught him that loyalty wasn't shouted, but lived in the small stands. "Spark filled me in," he said, helmet tucked under his arm, sweat beading on his forehead from the rising heat. "Got a buddy at the dispatch lines, owes me from a tow job. Can pull logs without raising flags." They huddled closer, voices overlapping in a symphony of strategy. Safe routes for Karina to a temporary spot, anonymous tips to hail at the precinct, a quiet watch on Marcus's haunts without crossing into vigilante shadows. But tensions simmered beneath the planning, ethical fault lines cracking open. Torque paused mid-sentence, staring at the notepad's scrawled notes. "What if Hale's in deeper than we think? Seen it before. Good men twisted by the system." The room stilled, the radio's static underscoring the dilemma. Spark met his gaze, her medic's precision in her reply. "Then we go around. Truth don't need permission, it just needs voices." Karina spoke up then, her voice gaining strength. "Like a engine turning over after a stall. I've been silent too long. If this exposes more, I want that. For everyone like me." Her words hung, a moral compass steadying the group, reminding them that redemption wasn't solitary, it was shared, a chain of choices linking the broken. Outside, the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the workshop windows in amber hues. The city's roar fading to an evening murmur. Phones buzzed with confirmations, more crew en route, a network activating like dormant circuits. Torque felt the pull of it all, the old promise to Jax swelling in his chest, not as burden, but as fuel. Karina stood, testing her resolve by the door, the card from his pocket now tucked safe in her pocket. "This changes things," she said softly, eyes meeting his. He nodded, the lines of his face etching deeper. "It does. and we're just getting started." As dusk settled, casting long shadows across the concrete, a low rumble approached. Not a single bike, but a formation, headlights piercing the twilight like beacons. The crew had answered the call, not for spectacle, but for the quiet honor of standing firm. Marcus's web trembled unseen, corruption's threads straining against the light they carried. In the heart of the city, where secrets festered, a single intervention had ignited a fire, one that burned clean, drawing the chosen family closer, promising justice not through thunder, but through the unbreaking word. The road ahead twisted with uncertainty, but for the first time, Torque rode it with purpose renewed, the echoes of loyalty vibrating like an engine primed for the long haul. The twilight deepened into a velvet shroud over the workshop, the first stars pricking the sky like distant campfires from Torque's desert memories. Headlights sliced through the gathering dusk as the Iron Promise riders pulled up in a loose formation, engines purring to a halt with the precision of old habits. Not a thunderous parade, but a quiet convergence. 7 bikes now, their chrome catching the last amber rays, riders dismounting with the creak of leather and the soft thud of boots on gravel. Greer nodded greetings, his sandwich forgotten on the bench, while Spark moved among them like a sentinel, handing out water bottles and clipped updates. Karina lingered by the workbench, her silhouette framed against the glowing windows, watching this unlikely assembly with eyes that held a mix of awe and lingering caution. The air carried the mingled sense of cooling exhaust, fresh-cut grass from a nearby lot, and the faint, earthy promise of night rain. Torque stepped out to meet them, his limp swallowed by the shadows, the weight of leadership settling on his shoulders like an old saddle. First was Reyes, a broad-shouldered veteran in his 50s, his face mapped with lines from too many stakeouts and not enough sleep. He'd traded the badge for freelance security after seeing the rot from inside, his own promise to the crew a silent oath against the corruption that had soured his final years on the force. "Hails clean as they come," Reyes said, voice a low rumble as he clasped Torque's forearm. "But he's buried in paperwork. Says the alley clip's enough for a restraint order, but Marcus's name pops in low-level reports. Harassment calls that go nowhere. Smells like strings pulled." He glanced toward Karina, offering a respectful dip of his head, the kind that spoke of shared battles without needing words. The group filtered inside, the workshop expanding to hold them all, bodies leaning against tool carts, murmurs blending with the tick of cooling engines outside. Jax's namesake passed around a stack of printouts from his dispatch contact, time-stamps of Marcus's movements, overlapping with unsolved complaints from women who'd vanished from public view, their voices silenced by fear or worse. No graphic details, just the cold facts, the pattern of isolation, the echoes of threats that left marks invisible to the eye. Spark pinned the sheets to a corkboard, scavenged from the back, her movements efficient, like stitching a wound before it festered. "We map it," she said, tracing lines between pins with a marker that squeaked softly. "Connect the dots without touching the fire. Get Karina's statement notarized. Loop in a counselor from the community center. Make it official. Make it stick." Karina stepped forward, her voice threading into the conversation like a new gear meshing. "There's a place he goes, a club on Elm. Backroom meetings with suits who flash badges like toys." The words came haltingly at first, then steadier, fueled by the circle of faces turned her way, not pitying but resolute. Greer chuckled dryly, wiping his hands on a rag stained with years of labor. "Elm's a snake pit. Knew a waitress there once. Saw too much, talk less after. We'll start subtle, coffee runs, ears open. Rees." The plan unfolded in fragments, a tapestry of quiet actions. Reyes shadowing leads through old networks, Jax's namesake monitoring traffic cams for patterns, Spark prepping a safe house in the suburbs, A nondescript rental with a reinforced door and a view of open fields. No raids, no confrontations, just the steady drip of evidence, building pressure like steam in a boiler. But as the discussion deepened, the ethical shadows lengthened. Talk paused by the corkboard, his finger hovering over a pin marked with a faded diner where Karina had once waited tables. "This could drag innocents in," he said, the gravel in his voice turning thoughtful. "What if exposing Marcus pulls the whole web down? Good cops with him, families caught in the crossfire." The room quieted. The hum of a fluorescent light underscoring the dilemma. Reyes leaned forward, elbows on knees, his eyes reflecting the board's dim glow. "That's the cost of light, brother. Jax wouldn't have stood by. Neither will we. But we choose clean. Record everything, share with oversight, let the truth carve its path." Spark nodded, her tattooed arms crossing like a barrier. "And if it twists, we adapt. Loyalty's our compass, not the law's blindfold." Karina absorbed it all, the workshop's warmth seeping into her bones, chasing away the alley's chill. For years she'd navigated alone, Marcus's control a fog that blurred her edges. Now, this ragtag family, scarred by their own wars, bound by vows etched deeper than ink, offered a clarity she'd forgotten existed. She traced the emblem on Torquus' jacket, the iron promise insignia worn but unbroken. Why do this? For a stranger in an alley? Torque met her gaze, the lines around his eyes crinkling faintly. Strangers become kin when the promise calls. Lost my way after the sands, thought riding solo was enough. But Jax's words, they pull you back. You're not just saving yourself, you're lighting the path for the next one. Outside, the night fully claimed the sky, stars winking through wisps of cloud as the first drops of rain pattered on the tin roof, a soft percussion that matched the group's resolve. They broke into smaller huddles, Reyes and Jax plotting routes on the map, Greer and Spark inventorying supplies for the safe house, while Torque walked Karina to a corner alcove, away from the bustle. "First light, we move you," he said, handing her a spare jacket, heavy with the scent of leather and road dust. She nodded, slipping it on, the fabric enveloping her like armor. In that moment, the air between them hummed with unspoken alliance, a thread weaving her into the crew's fabric. As the rain steadied into a rhythmic downpour, washing the streets clean, a phone buzzed sharply. Hale's line. Torque answered. The conversation clipped, tension coiling in his stance. "Got a hit," Hale's voice crackled through the speaker shared with the group. "Marcus's crew's stirring. Words out you're poking. Stay sharp. No lone wolves." The call ended, leaving a charged silence, the workshop's lights casting heroic shadows on the walls. Torque pocketed the phone, his jaw set. "They're watching. Means we're close." The crew exchanged glances, a silent pact renewing in the storm's hush. Karina felt it too, the shift from victim to vanguard, her silence breaking like waves on shore. The night stretched ahead, fraught with whispers of pursuit, but the iron promise stood firm, engines idling in the rain-slicked lot like guardians at dawn. Torque's promise to Jax burned brighter now, a beacon against the corruption's tide, drawing the family chosen closer. Justice wasn't a blaze, but a steady flame, and in its glow, redemption flickered for them all. Quiet, unyielding, echoing through the city's veiled heart. If this story's hitting home, smash that like button. Your support keeps these tales of quiet courage rolling. The rain had eased to a misty veil by midnight, cloaking the city in a sheen that turned streetlights into hazy halos. Torque stood at the workshop's open door, the cool dampness seeping into his bones as he watched the crew's bikes gleam under the downpour's remnants. Water dripped from the eaves in a steady rhythm, syncing with the low murmur of voices inside, plans refining like edges on a blade. Karina huddled in the alcove, the borrowed jacket draped over her shoulders, its weight a tangible reminder that she wasn't facing the shadows alone. The air inside carried the comforting bite of brewed coffee and the faint ozone of wet earth, grounding the tension that hummed like an idling engine. Reyes broke the quiet first, folding the map with deliberate care, his broad hands steady despite the lines of fatigue etching his face. Safe houses set, old mill on the outskirts, neutral ground. No ties to us, easy out if needed. He glanced at Karina, his voice softening just a notch. You'll have eyes on the approaches, but it's quiet, like riding empty roads at dawn. She'd nodded earlier, the group's resolve wrapping around her like a shield, but now doubt flickered in her eyes, the alley's echo pulling at the edges of her newfound strength. Torque caught it, stepping closer, his boots leaving faint prints on the concrete floor. Second thoughts? He asked, not pressing, just offering space for the truth. She shook her head, fingers twisting the jacket's hem. It's not that. Just, what if this drags you all down? Marcus's world, it's not just him. There are people who make problems disappear. Her words hung, laced with the weight of lived experience, the kind that scarred without leaving visible marks. Spark overheard from the workbench, pausing in her inventory of supplies. A first aid kit, burner phones, notebooks for statements. We've danced with worse, she said, her tone even, eyes meeting Karina's with the quiet authority of someone who'd stitched wounds in the field. Desert ops, where one wrong call meant everything. But we stick to the code. Light over darkness. No shortcuts. It was the iron promise, ethos, woven into every patch and scar, a vow that turned strangers into sentinels. Greer shuffled over, his knee protesting with a soft creak, carrying a thermos refilled with hot soup from his cooler's depths. The steam carried hints of herbs and warmth, cutting through the chill. Eat, he urged Karina, pressing a bowl into her hands. Can't ride on empty. As she sipped, the group circled back to the corkboard, pins casting tiny shadows in the lamp's glow. Jax's namesake had pulled more threads, dispatch logs showing Marcus's vehicle circling Karina's old haunts, overlapping with reports of disturbances at the Elm Club, where whispers hinted at off-book deals, shielding the influential from scrutiny. No names dropped, just the pattern. Favors traded in smoke-filled rooms, silence bought with intimidation. Torque traced a line on the board, his mind flashing to Jax's last stand, the dust-choked air, the promise gasped amid rubble. We move at first light. Reyes, you and Jax take point on the club. Coffee shop across the street, blend in. Ears only. Reyes grunted agreement, but his gaze sharpened. Heard from my old line. Hale's pushing the restraint order through channels, but there's pushback. Some desk jockeys stalling, citing insufficient evidence. Smells like protection from higher up. The words landed like gravel under tires, stirring the room's undercurrent. Spark crossed her arms, tattoos shifting like shadows. Then we build the evidence ourselves. Karina's word, the recording, witness statements from the street that night. Make it a flood they can't dam. The ethical knot tightened then, as the rain picked up again, drumming on the roof like impatient fingers. Karina set the bowl down, her voice gaining a quiet steel. I want to help, not just hide. There's a neighbor saw things at my old place, but she's scared. If I talk to her... Torque held up a hand, gentle but firm. Not alone. We pair up, cover each other. No heroes charging blind. It echoed his own regrets, the blast that took Jax, the limp that whispered of overreach. The crew murmured assent, the bond pulling taut, loyalty not as blind force, but as deliberate choice, honoring the fallen by protecting the living. As the hours ticked toward dawn, the workshop pulsed with subdued activity. Greer tuned a bike in the corner, the wrenches clink a meditative beat. Spark reviewed protocols for the safe house, her medic's precision ensuring no loose ends. Karina joined Jax's namesake at the table, sketching details of Marcus's routines, the late-night drives, the hangouts where power plays unfolded behind velvet ropes. Her input sharpened the map, turning vague suspicions into actionable paths. Torque watched from the doorway, the misty night air cooling his thoughts. This convergence felt like redemption's slow burn, the iron promise rekindling not through spectacle, but through these shared breaths, the quiet stand against a system that favored the shadowed over the steadfast. A distant siren wailed, slicing the quiet, pulling all eyes to the windows. Reyes checked his phone, no alerts, just the city's restless hum. "They're out there," he said, voice low. "Stirring because we're moving." Karina's hand steadied on the table, fear yielding to resolve, the alley's terror receding like fog under sun. Torque nodded to her, a silent affirmation. "Dawn breaks soon. We ride together." The words carried Jax's echo, a promise renewed in the dim light, binding them against the encroaching web. Outside, the mist thickened, veiling the lot where bikes waited like faithful hounds. The crew prepared to scatter, scouts to the club, escorts for the safe house, each step a thread in the tapestry of truth. Corruption's tendrils reached, but the iron promise's light held steady, illuminating paths of justice forged in honor. For Torque, it was more than intervention. It was legacy, the unbreaking word that turned loss into purpose. Drawing the chosen family into the fray with quiet, unyielding grace. The city slumbered unaware, but the echoes built, promising a reckoning as inevitable as the rising sun. Dawn's first light bled through the mist like watered-down gold, casting a pale sheen over the workshop lot where the Iron Promise bike stood in silent vigil. Torque revved his engine softly, the low growl vibrating through his chest as he scanned the group. 7 riders now, helmets tucked under arms, faces set in the quiet determination of those who'd stared down worse than city shadows. Karina emerged from the doorway, backpack slung over one shoulder, the borrowed jacket still enveloping her frame like a second skin. Her eyes, shadowed by the night's vigil, met Torque's with a nod that spoke volumes. No words needed for the trust budding in that fragile space between strangers turned allies. The air hung heavy with the scent of wet asphalt and cooling rain, the city's early hum just stirring. Distant horns, the shuffle of commuters, a lone bird calling from the sparse trees. Spark pulled up beside Karina on her sleek cruiser, the sidecar rigged for the short haul to the safe house. "Stick close," she said, voice steady as she handed Karina a spare helmet, its visor scratched from road-worn miles. "We'll weave through the back streets, no straight shots." Greer and Jax's namesake flanked them, engines idling like watchful guardians, while Reyes and 2 others peeled off toward Elm Street, their taillights fading into the fog for the recon run. Torque led the escort, his limp forgotten in the saddle's embrace, the throttle responding to his grip like an old friend's pulse. This wasn't a charge into battle. It was a measured exodus, honoring the promise with precision over fury. Jax's ghost rode shotgun in his mind, whispering reminders of costs tallied in the sands, lives saved not by blaze, but by the steady hand. The convoy slipped into the waking streets, tires hissing on damp pavement, the mist parting like reluctant curtains. Karina gripped the sidecar's edge, the wind whipping strands of hair from under her helmet, carrying the faint tang of exhaust and freedom's edge. For the first time in months, the knot in her chest loosened, the alley's chokehold receding with each turn. Torque glanced in his mirror, seeing her silhouette against the blurring cityscape. Apartment blocks rising like silent judges, neon signs flickering off in the light. He'd mapped this route a dozen times in his head overnight, avoiding Marcus's known patrols, but unease gnawed at him. a mechanic's instinct for hidden faults. The crew moved as one, signals flashing in the rear view, clear ahead, eyes open. Loyalty wasn't noise. It was this seamless rhythm, the chosen family threading through chaos without a word wasted. They hit the outskirts as the sun crested, burning off the mist to reveal the old mill, a weathered brick relic on a forgotten stretch of riverbank. Its windows boarded but sturdy, surrounded by overgrown weeds that whispered in the breeze. Spark killed her engine first, the sidecar crunching gravel as Karina dismounted, legs unsteady but eyes scanning the perimeter with newfound vigilance. "Home for now," Spark murmured, unlocking the reinforced door with a key from her pocket. Inside, the space unfolded simply. A main room with cots and a kitchenette stocked by Greer's foresight, sunlight slanting through cracks to dance on dust motes. No frills, just sanctuary, the kind built from necessity, echoing the bunkers Torque remembered from overseas, where promises were the only walls that held. As the group unloaded supplies, canned goods, a radio tuned to static-free frequencies, Torque's phone buzzed in his pocket, Hale's name lighting the screen. He stepped outside, the river's murmur providing cover, the crew giving him space without question. "Talk to me," Torque said, voice low, the phone pressed to his ear amid the scent of damp earth and wildflowers. Hale's reply came clipped, laced with the strain of a man navigating minefields. Restraint orders filed, but it's snagged. Brass upstairs is dragging feet. Someone's whispering in ears. Your clip helped, but they want more. And talk. Words leaking. Marcus's circle knows you're involved. Watch your backs. The line went dead, leaving Torque staring at the river's lazy flow, ripples catching the light like fractured promises. Corruption's hand reached further than he'd gauged, tendrils coiling into the precinct's veins, turning justice into a game of favors. He pocketed the phone and re-entered, the door creaking shut behind him like a seal on secrets. The crew had settled into watch rotations, Spark on first shift, her medic kit open on the table, Greer tinkering with a loose window latch. Karina unpacked her bag, pulling out a small notebook, her handwriting neat despite the tremor. "I wrote down more," she said, sliding it toward Torque. Pages filled with dates, conversations, the subtle aggressions that had built Marcus's cage, phone logs, license plates, names of associates who'd laughed off her pleas. It was raw, unfiltered, the kind of evidence that humanized the abstract, turning fear into fuel. Torque scanned it, the weight of her courage settling beside Jax's vow. "This strengthens the case," he replied, folding it carefully. "Reyes will feed it to Hale through back channels. We build the wall higher." But the morning's peace fractured mid-conversation, a low rumble approaching. Not the crew's bikes, but a single engine, too purposeful for coincidence. Jax's namesake peered through a slit in the boarded window, his frame tensing. Black sedan, circling slow, no plates visible. The room stilled, breath sinking like a held note, the air thickening with the river's damp chill. Torque motioned them low, instincts from the desert kicking in. Move silent, assess first. Karina's eyes widened. But she didn't bolt. Instead, she clutched the notebook, resolve hardening her jaw. Spark drew a curtain tighter, the fabric whispering against the sill. Outside, the sedan idled, tires crunching gravel, then peeled away, vanishing into the tree line. A probe, not a strike, Marcus testing edges, his web probing for weakness. Greer broke the silence first, his voice a gravelly anchor. "They're rattled, means our light's hitting sore spots." Nods rippled through the group, the ethical fire stoked anew. Torque paced the worn floorboards, the creak underscoring his thoughts. "No retaliation. We document, report, let the truth grind them down." It was the creed's core. Justice as endurance, not eruption. Honoring the fallen by choosing integrity over impulse. Karina stood, joining him at the window, the river's flow mirroring her steadying breath. "That was close," she whispered, but her tone carried gratitude, the isolation of her past fracturing under the crew's shadow. Torque placed a hand on the sill, not touching her, just sharing the view. "Closer, we'll get to breaking it. You're part of this now. Our promise extends." As noon approached, the sun warming the mill's bricks, Reyes radioed in from Elm. Eyes on the club, murmurs of a meeting tonight, suits and badges mingling in the back. The pieces aligned, a mosaic of corruption emerging. Marcus as a cog in a machine that silenced the vulnerable for the powerful's comfort. Spark brewed coffee on a hot plate, the aroma filling the space like a balm. While Jax's namesake sketched escape routes on a napkin, tension hummed, but so did unity, the chosen family's bonds tightening against the strain. Torque felt Jax's presence stronger here, in this riverside haven, the promise evolving from personal vow to collective shield. Outside, the sedan didn't return, but the air held a watchful hush, the river carrying secrets downstream. Karina traced the notebook's edge, her silence no longer a cage, but a weapon sharpening. For Torque, the intervention in the alley had bloomed into this, redemption's quiet forge, where loyalty forged paths through moral fog. The city loomed distant, its underbelly stirring, but here in the mill's embrace, the iron promise stood unbowed, echoes of honor building toward the inevitable clash. The road curved sharper now, stakes rising with the sun, but they rode it together, lights cutting the gathering clouds. The sun hung high over the old mill by early afternoon, its rays filtering through the boarded windows in slivers that danced across the scarred wooden table like fleeting spotlights. Torque sat with the notebook open before him, Karina's handwriting a testament to endurance, lines of dates and details that mapped not just threats, but the slow erosion of her world. The air inside carried the rich, grounding aroma of Spark's coffee, mingling with the river's faint, briny whisper, seeping through the cracks, a sensory anchor amid the mounting storm. Outside, the gravel crunched sporadically under the crew's boots as they rotated watches, engines occasionally humming to life for quick perimeter checks. No sign of the black sedan since its probing circle, but the unease lingered. A low vibration like an unbalanced wheel on the open road. Karina paced the narrow space between cots, her steps measured now, the borrowed jacket zipped against the chill that had nothing to do with the weather. "I keep thinking about the neighbor, Lila. She saw him once, dragging me back inside after an argument. Wouldn't say a word to the cops, but maybe." Her voice trailed, laced with the quiet fire of someone reclaiming her narrative. Torque looked up, his salt and pepper beard catching the light, eyes reflecting the depth of his own buried regrets. "We'll reach out through Reyes. Neutral ground, no pressure. Your story's the key. Hers just adds weight." He closed the notebook gently, the snap echoing like a decision finalized. Jax's promise thrummed in his veins. Watch over the lost, light the shadows, not as a chain, but as the compass guiding this convergence of scarred souls. Spark entered from the kitchenette, wiping her hands on a dish towel, her tattoos vivid under the lamp's glow. Radio from Elm. Meetings on tonight. Reyes counts 3 suits, 2 badges, low brass but connected. Chatter about cleaning house on loose ends. She set a fresh mug before Karina, the steam curling like unspoken alliances. Greer's voice rumbled from the corner, where he oiled a chain with rhythmic precision, the metallic scent sharp in the air. "Loose ends like you, miss, but they've poked the wrong hive." Jax's namesake nodded from his post by the window, phone in hand, scrolling encrypted messages. The cruise network hummed invisibly, tips from cabbies who'd ferried Marcus's crew, whispers from diner regulars who'd overheard boasts. No invasions, just the patient gathering of threads, weaving a net of truth against the corruption's frayed edges. As the afternoon waned, the ethical current swirled deeper. Talk stepped outside alone, the river's flow a soothing murmur against the gravel underfoot. Sunlight glinting off ripples like scattered chrome. He leaned against the mill's weathered wall, the brick cool through his jacket, mind replaying the alley's pivotal moment, Karina's flinch, Marcus's retreat under the weight of a single recording. It had started small, an instinctual stand, but now it ballooned into this. A stand against a system where power silenced the vulnerable. Badges turned blind eyes for the right whisper. Jax's face flickered in his thoughts, dust-caked and determined. His last words, a vow talk, had nearly let rust. "Redemption's not a solo ride," he muttered to the breeze, the words solidifying his resolve. Returning inside, he found the group huddled, faces illuminated by the tablet's screen. Reyes streaming grainy footage from a hidden cam across from the club, shadows of men in hushed exchange. "We go public tomorrow," Talk announced, a voice steady as the river's current. "Hale's got the order. We pair it with statements, the logs, Karina's notebook, leak it clean to the oversight board, the press that digs real dirt. No names dropped reckless, just the pattern." Murmurs of agreement rippled, but Karina's brow furrowed, the weight of exposure pressing. What if they come harder? That's Sedan. Spark placed a hand on her shoulder, light but reassuring, the medic's touch a bridge across fears. "Then we adapt. Safe houses have backups. We've got routes mapped like veins, but hiding feeds the dark. This breaks it." The room nodded. The chosen family's loyalty a palpable force, forged not in blood, but in the quiet choices that bound them. Veterans, mechanics, a woman rising from silence, all echoing Jax's unyielding creed. Dusk fell softly, painting the mill in twilight hues, the river's surface turning to liquid obsidian under the fading light. The crew shared a simple meal, Greer's sandwiches, augmented with canned soup heated on the hot plate, the clink of utensils a counterpoint to the night's encroaching hush. Stories flowed then, not of glory, but of small victories. Sparks' field patches under fire, Greer's desert tows that saved more than vehicles, Jax's namesake's first ride honoring his uncle. Karina listened, her laughter tentative at first, then genuine. The sound cutting through the tension like dawn's first ray. Talk watched, the lines of his face softening, feeling the promise fulfill itself in these shared breaths. The redemption of standing firm, turning personal scars into collective strength. The radio crackled just after full dark, Reyes's voice cutting through. Meetings wrapping, they mentioned a problem at the river, us, sending feelers, but Hale's order hit their desks, panic setting in. Cheers were muted, replaced by focused plans, evac routes if needed, a dawn handoff to a trusted counselor for Karina's official statement. Outside, stars emerged overhead, sharp against the cloudless sky, the air crisp with the scent of pine from the tree line. Talker walked the perimeter one last time, boots sinking into soft earth, the night's quiet amplifying the distant city hum, a reminder that their light pierced further than these walls. By midnight, the mill settled into watchful repose, cots creaking under weary forms, the river's lullaby underscoring the vigil. Karina slept fitfully at first, then deeply, the notebook clutched like a talisman. Talk sat by the window, coffee gone cold, contemplating the road ahead. Marcus's web unraveling, not by force but by the inexorable truth. Corruption, exposed in the glare of unbreaking honor. The iron promise had reformed around this spark. Scattered members texting in from afar, ready to ride if the call deepened. For Torque, it was closure on Jax's vow, a legacy carried forward in quiet courage. Dawn broke clear, the sun rising unhindered, bathing the lot in golden warmth. Hale arrived in an unmarked car, his grizzled frame emerging with a folder thick as resolve. "It's done," he said, handing Karina the stamped order. His eyes meeting Torque's in silent gratitude. "Your evidence tipped it. Internal reviews launching. Marcus and his ties. They're cornered. No shadows left. No arrests in the night, but the web frayed. Whispers of resignations. Investigations blooming like desert flowers after rain." Karina exhaled, the weight lifting. Her smile tentative but real as she boarded Spark's sidecar for the city return. Not to hide, but to reclaim. The crew rode out in formation, engines roaring softly against the morning mist, the river shrinking in their mirrors. Torque led, wind whipping his beard, the thrum of the bike syncing with his heartbeat, a rhythm of redemption earned. Karina glanced back once, the mill fading, then forward into the light. The city awaited, changed by their stand. Justice, moral, not vengeful. Family chosen, unbreakable. Promises survived, echoing through the streets. A legacy of honor in a world of fleeting noise. The road stretched open, but they rode it bound. Lights steady against whatever shadows lingered. Thank you for riding this journey with us. If stories of quiet courage and unbreakable promises move you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We've got more tales waiting on the horizon.